Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization projects and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about uncovering untapped potential in your team. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Dr. Clint Ladine. Welcome, Clint.
Hey, thank you for having me, Jana.
I'm so glad that you could join us. Can you share a little bit about your background?
I previously in a former life played professional basketball in Europe. I then was involved with some organizations at the C-suite level here in the city, San Francisco, California, where I was introduced to some coaching, which ultimately changed my trajectory and led me to go learn more about coaching, where I went on to earn my doctorate in the field of executive coaching and strategic planning, and have been working in that field ever since.
That's great. And so, I guess maybe one interesting question to start things off with, how does coaching in basketball relate to coaching in corporations? Is there a crossover? Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime you talk about leadership, right, you're talking about influencing people. And so when you're influencing teams, you want to maximize potential. You want to ensure that teams are working cohesively. And so, a coach in basketball, his job oftentimes, I think, is to manage egos, right? If you can imagine, when you get to the top of a profession, I know you work with a lot of top professionals. A lot of times people have risen there because they are very talented and they know how to execute. And a lot of times you're coaching to ego. And so one of the things that basketball and corporate life have in common is, how do you begin to go into that? How do you begin to unearth those things that can be detrimental when you talk about ego, and how can you accentuate the positive components so that people can flourish? And so those are kind of the tie-ins that we have.
And I guess what would also be interesting is when you have a group of people like that and making up of a team, more in the corporate world, I guess, than basketball now. How do you help them work together? What kind of things do you focus on that helps them, maybe realize it's better to be a part of a team than to be a lone wolf or and do it on their own?
Yeah, I think part of that is, and this is where coaching comes into play, is you want to help people understand their why. So in every team, in every position, there's a underlying why in the human condition that causes people to behave in certain ways and to act in certain ways. And so when you look at those motivational levers that people have, right, to succeed, or they're driven and they want to be the best in their area, you also, deep down in there, you want to help them to understand that why they're doing it, why they're driven, and then help them to also tap into that corporate part as well, or the community part as well. And in that, when they begin to understand their why, and you can begin to help them reframe that, how it helps the community or the corporation as a whole.
And what type of things get in the way of maybe of the coaching or people reaching their potential?
A lot of times it is, right, that double-edged sword. A lot of times it is, I've seen in coaching people, is that ego, the idea that, as you mentioned, the lone wolf, that I can do it alone. And so where that hinders people is, right, we all know that there's a greater impact that we can have together. And so oftentimes it's helping people realize, and helping leaders realize, that when they're able to bring their teams together, when they're able to work together cohesively, that their teams excel, and that ultimately they excel as well. But too often people have this blockage of, I have to be the woman, or I have to be the man, or people need to know that Clint gets things done. but ultimately helping them realize that with humility and with bringing people together, that that everybody can be successful, and that goes into having coaching people towards that abundance mentality.
Mm. Well, and so, that's kind of interesting. I guess one of the things I talk a lot to my teams about how there's enough business for everybody, right? So we don't have to, kind of like what you're talking about, abundance mentality. And so we don't need to go talk poorly about competitors or things like that, because, there's enough business to go around. But one of the things that I'd be curious about, like, again, kind of, the notion is a little archaic, where the leader is expected to be the smartest person in the room, right? Or the leader is expected to know it all. Do you think that still, is that the right philosophy? Question number one. And question number two, do you think that some of that mentality still exists today?
Yeah, you still see that in some circles. I think it's people are realizing that's not the most effective way to lead. And really, when you look at really successful leaders, I really believe those that are able to exercise humility, those that want their direct reports or those that are working under them or their teammates, right? Those leaders that want them to excel and they want the best for them are really going to be the ones that see people stay long term. They're going to see people excel, and they're going to see increase in productivity, and they're going to see an increase in employee engagement as well. But that takes a real humility to allow others to flourish. And I think it's one of the highest skill sets that a leader can have. If they can develop that, they will see their teams and their organizations succeed wildly.
What role do you think that leader vulnerability plays in building teams?
I am a big proponent of it. I think if you want to know others, you need to be known. And so once again, a leader is going into, right, in anything, when you talk about strategy, when you talk about markets, they're leading the charge. They're going into uncharted waters. And I would posit that similarly, right, when you talk about vulnerability, leaders are doing the same thing, should do the same thing. They should begin to go out there and allow themselves to be known. And to begin to do it, I would encourage them in small chunks, right? With trust, as you share something, as you're able to, share a mistake, that vulnerability builds engagement with your staff. And just like, you can pick a strategy as a leader and it might not be perfect, or it might not go well. Similarly, when you share, it might not go perfectly. People might not receive it as you wanted them to. But once again, it's that leadership where you're going into uncharted waters, leading the way. And I'm a big proponent. I just think it helps drive team cohesiveness. And I think if you can do it, it's something you should strive for.
What are some of the other kind of key attributes that would drive team cohesiveness?
Yeah, that the ability to want others to succeed. When you know them, and when you really get down and begin to know your team, know what makes them tick, know their motivational levers, when you understand their personal whys as well, when you're invested in them, we do, right? I get it. We are a workplace. There's a one side where people say, hey, it's a workplace. I get my family things at home, and I get my friends things, here. But I really think when you begin to know them and know what they want, you can begin to find projects where they excel. You can begin to find tasks where they excel. You can begin to communicate in ways that are effective for them, right? Because so often we think, oh, this worked for me when my boss used to tell me this, And then we think, okay, I'm just going to cascade that down to my staff. But when you take the time to ask, questions and find out, right? How do what stirs you, right? Some people it might be a pizza. Some people it might be like, I love it when you shout me out at a meeting and tell me how great I am. Others, it might be, I love a gift card, or I love the opportunity to lead a project. And when you begin to find out those things and begin to tap into it, and people are like, man, she or he is really concerned with me. They really want me to do well. They're concerned with my growth as well. Man, people will say, hey, how can I get in line? How can I be part of this organization? And how can I help it excel too? They're wanting me to excel.
Hmm. So what does a team look like, a cohesive team look like, or what are their behaviors when things are going wrong? Like, how do you see a team like that turn things around?
Yeah, a team where things are going wrong, you're going to see people wanting to take credit. If there is something that is positive, you're going to see people that are going to jump up and want to take credit for it instead of spreading the goodness around the team, right? They're going to want to take credit for any wins that the team might experience. You're going to see people that are not supportive, right? If there's a cross-functional strategy that needs to take place, and somebody you're going to see players and teammates begin to say, hey, that's not my job. That's not my lane. I can't cross over there, and I won't help you out as well. And you're going to see people, I will say this too, you're going to see teams that are going to pull back emotionally. They're not going to be emotionally available. You're going to see them closed off. You're going to see them sitting at meetings like this. You're going to see them not sharing. And ultimately, you're not going to have knowledge being transferred, knowledge being shared. And so you're going to see unhealth that way. And then I would also say, when you see an unhealthy team, right, you can tell, right? When you walk into a meeting room, and I'll go back to a basketball analogy too. Same with corporate. When you walk into the gym for practice, you can tell by the way, are they engaging? Are they, talking about their families? Is there small talk? Is that happening? If it's not, then I would say, hey, some of that cohesion is beginning to melt away. And you want to begin to nip that in the bud before you have a fractured team and it gets really poisonous.
If you do have, I guess, some of that going on, how do you coach people what to do with those individuals, and how to, maybe coach them to the right attitude, or coach them out, I suppose. Like, what do you do in the situation where you've got somebody who's starting to be poisonous to the team?
Yeah, that we'll go for the more positive. We'll assume that they, want to might receive some coaching or some crucial conversations. Yeah, you want to begin to spend that time with them in a one-on-one setting, right? In person, and to begin to ask some of those questions. What's going on with you? Where are you at? How do you feel about your role? What's going right here? What are you loving? What are you loving about our team interactions? What's been a highlight for you recently as well? And then you can also, of course, go into the things of, hey, what are your pain points right now? What's frustrating you? What could we do better? And then, a hard question for us as leaders that we don't like to ask is, but what can I do as a leader to better motivate you, right? Even though it might not be your issue, but simply asking that question. And there could be a blind spot there that the leader has, or that the team has. And I would encourage the leader as well to really dig in, because, and you've probably seen this, Janet, as well, is that you might ask a question, right? And a lot of people are good at playing what I call the corporate game. They'll give a good corporate answer to you at the surface level. But but I would encourage leaders to maybe dig in with, one or two other questions to begin to dig deeper to see what's there. Because a lot of times people are very scared, trust isn't high, they're not sure if they can speak with candor. Is there psychological safety here? And if you're able to go a little bit deeper with the questions of, like, hey, it seemed, maybe even it seemed, my perception was that you were frustrated, was there anything that could have been done better? They might give you a corporate answer. Hey, John, how would you have handled that? When we talk about our meetings, should they go like this? What do you think? Maybe another standard answer. Hey, what's the best, what's most ideal meeting look like and communication look like for you, John? Do you like excitement? Do you like just down, brass tacks? And so really digging in there, and you can maybe unearth some of what's going on, and then begin to address those issues from there.
Mm. And then, I mean, do you have any good, I guess, anecdotes about, that you've heard or seen where people have been able to be coached and recover the relationship for the organization instead of being, have to leave?
Yeah, I can think of an organization that I was working with. They had somebody that was leading a division. The leader of the CEO of the organization could be a little bit prickly at times, and so this division leader was kind of having a tough time, but we was able to go in there and able to coach this CEO and begin to have some of these conversations, these tricky conversations around how he handled people, how he led meetings, how he would do what we call, maybe you've experienced these too, the after meeting, or the second meeting after a meeting that typically take place as well, that he would do. A decision would be made in the meeting, everybody was on board, then the CEO would go out, and then he would make a secondary decision that was contrary to the one that was just made. And so we were able to I was able to coach him on how these affected the organization, how they affected people, and get into some of the reasons why he would do that. And it got into, deep down, there was some feelings of he wasn't strong at crucial conversations. He wasn't strong at confrontations. There was a little bit of insecurity there. And then through that, we were able to help him establish meetings, talking points where he could, and some questions that would help him address some of those crucial conversations and begin to exercise that muscle, right? Not an overnight thing, but help him to begin to exercise those muscles to grow in.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to maybe pivot a little bit. You talk about a lot about limiting beliefs, and maybe this even ties a little bit to these people who maybe aren't performing to their full potential. What are limiting beliefs, and how do you identify if you have them?
Yeah, limiting beliefs are those that prevent you from executing your full potential. And a way to identify a limiting belief is, once you say something, if there's a statement or something you want to do, if the following word, I'm simplifying it, is because is after it, there could be a chance that it's a limiting belief. And you want to look at the statement after. So let's say you say something like, we possibly couldn't expand into this country because, I'm not talented enough to lead this charge. Okay. Because that's, I'm not talented enough to lead this charge is probably most certainly not true. If it was because this country is closed off and won't allow any new foreign investors to come in, well, that could be a truth. That's not a limiting belief. Okay. If there's a truth behind it. And so you want to begin to look at those and see where those are hindering your potential. And so oftentimes, I'll work with people, and you've probably seen as well, is that we built up these beliefs over the course of our lifetime, and we don't even know they exist. They've just become so hardwired in our brain, right? Those neural pathways have just built their highways, and we're not even aware of them until we begin to talk to somebody and begin to unearth those. Once you do begin to unearth them and address them, it's amazing what can take place. And it's so exciting watching people take off and remove some of those beliefs.
There's obviously a lot of, I've read a lot of actually different books on suggestions on how to address that. What is your approach for addressing those limiting beliefs?
Yeah, I'm really big on getting with someone and talking, right? Whether it's a mentor, whether it's a leader, obviously a coach is a great way to do that. But beginning to unearth and evoke some awareness surrounding some of those beliefs is really big. And then beginning to kind of reframe things and begin to find possibilities of how to overcome some of those beliefs. And so I think one of the key ways that you do that is, once you've identified a limiting belief, is then begin to take a simple action step towards conquering that belief. And so let's say, you're in the space of, I don't think I could ever write a book, right? I've never written, I've never done it before. I'm not a talented enough writer, whatever it may be. One of the things that you can do is to begin to, like I said, find out what are some of the reasons behind that, and then begin to take small, manageable steps towards that goal of, hey, I'm going to write this book, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to start out by writing 1 page a night, or working on 1 paragraph a day, whatever it may be, to begin to tackle some of those beliefs.
Have you come across in your research I'm drawing a blank on what they're called, but it's kind of those empowering statements or something where you say, I am this, I am a successful woman, I make great decisions, or whatever that is. Have you used that at all, or what's your impression of repeating that mantra every day?
Yeah, the affirmations.
Thank
Yes,
you.
I am a huge proponent of affirmations. When I coach people, I was just coaching somebody yesterday. Funny you mentioned, but struggling with limiting beliefs as well. And one of the things that I gave as an exercise to this person was beginning to use some of those affirmations, right? Whether it's you can go on YouTube, and they have things that you can listen to when you go to bed at night, right? And just fall asleep the first 20 minutes. There's books that you can read, right? Post-it notes you could put around your house, little journals that you can begin to write and read in. But yeah, I think that is so huge, because if you think about it, if you're fortunate to have somebody in your life, a mom or dad that was, positive and encourage you, right? That's amazing. But even in that, maybe you weren't told these positive things. You weren't told that you can do things. And then there's still a lot of people that have never heard anyone say anything positive about them or what they can do in their whole life. And so developing these pathways is huge, right? Whether it's, anything. I'll even go to some people will be like, okay, I have this huge goal, but Clint, I just struggle with work ethic, right? And so I would even, encourage them to get affirmations on work ethic of, what, I get things done. I wake up, I start my day off, and I begin to, work hard. I begin to get my mind ready. I begin to drive. I'm a driver. I get things done. And just beginning to develop that, and you would be surprised at how that can jumpstart your day and really get your mind in the right space. Because a lot of people, a lot of times, all of us, we struggle with things that come into our head that are either not true, they're limiting beliefs, and then are not helping us to excel and to reach our full potential. And so I would say, most definitely get with some affirmations and start bombarding your mind. And I'll use it like this too. Right back to the sports analogy. Training your body. You have to go to the gym every day. You have to do, you have to do this. I used to coach basketball as well for a moment. And I'm telling you, the key, a big key to those that are successful is that they believe that they are good. And they've told themselves, right, I can do this. I can run a huge company. I can run a huge division. I get things done. This project is something that I can tackle. When you get that down and you begin to exercise the other traits, I think you're going to excel.
So, the affirmations, and then I guess the other thing I've heard, especially like in parenting or, I suppose it's even in leadership is, talking to the person in a way that they've reached the goal. So if your child is always late, it's not that you're addressing them as being always late. You're like, oh, when you get there on time, or, you can be so punctual, or, I'm not sure, all the ways to put it, but what's the balance? Where I'm headed with all of this is, what's the balance between, like, sometimes it feels like lying versus reality. If you're sitting there saying, I am a frugal person, and you're not a frugal person. I know you're trying to convince yourself of that by saying the affirmation. But how for those people who are, maybe they're very black and white, how do they get past that? I feel like I'm lying to myself.
Yes, I that's funny, man. I literally had one of my clients just ask me that. They're like, Clint, you're lying. One of the key things is, right, going back and helping them reframe. Because there could be a component of truth, right? Let's say that they were late 99 times, right? But I think if you can find the one, right, you begin to reframe it and find the time that they were on time. If you begin to look into it, I think you're going to find things there that are true. And so if you find that one time, it's like, yeah, you know what? You are on time. You came on time. Remember last Tuesday? You were on time. You are on time person. You are a punctual person. Those other times, okay, did they happen? Was it true? Yes. Okay. Can we focus on that? Of course you can focus on that if you want to. You can tell your mind whatever you want. You can say, like I was telling you, can say, oh, I'm not successful because I didn't fill in the blank, or I'm not punctual because I didn't go those times. That is true. You didn't make it on time those times. But do you want to focus, right? You're trying to redo these neural pathways. Hey, you were on time. And you know what? And you take that in the business world, we're not always successful. We don't always do things perfectly. We don't always win games on the basketball court, right? But if you can begin to find those things, right, and begin to focus on them, you know what? Hey, Barbara, I remember when you led this project, man, your team was strong, man. They were growing together. You fostered that connectivity, right? Were some of the components that you did that you focused on? Wow, that's cool. You really are a good leader. I've seen you do it. But a lot of times we want to go to the many other negative things and the times where it didn't work, or what we don't have, or what we haven't accomplished, or what title we don't have. But if you can begin to reframe that and really look in, I bet you can find some things, and you begin to camp on those things, and that's going to set you up for the next thing. And so that would be my tip. Reframe that, find that thing. And I'm just thinking of the one is a solopreneur I was working with, and he was, concentrating on, I haven't done this, and I'm not successful. And I said, well, wait a minute, you just sold this, you just created this, so you are doing it, you are successful, you created a product, you're selling it. Is it at the level you want it to be? Maybe not. But don't tell yourself that you are not doing it and that you're not successful, because you have done it and you're going to do it in the future.
No, it's interesting. So I guess my last question around all of that would be, so obviously maybe you do have some of those, like you're saying, there are elements of it that are true. And so you're telling yourself, I am this. So maybe I am a great leader. But to be a truly great leader, maybe there's a gap between where you are and where you've been. And so just telling yourself, I am this, is changing your mindset. It's getting you on the positive focus, but there's still no actual action there. So how do you then bridge the gap between, where you really are and where you should be?
Yeah, you want to begin to take, I'm really big proponent on taking small steps. People get overwhelmed at the big picture of where they want to be oftentimes, right? Because we've created this big thing that we need to be. And so I'm big at taking small steps towards that. So, while you're feeding your mind with some of those positive affirmations, you begin to want to take steps as well towards that. So it could be taking a class, it could be hiring a coach, it could be to going on a webinar, it could be to having coffee with another leader that you respect and getting their feedback, or some of their top 3 practices and behaviors that they do to build strong teams and strong organizations. And so you want to continue to take those steps to ensure that you're moving on the right path. So you're 100% correct. Just feeding your mind with the affirmations is not going to be enough. I hope I didn't give that impression. But you also want to be taking those steps towards getting better and ensuring that you're becoming the best version of you and your leadership.
Great. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show. What top 3 things would you leave behind with the audience today?
Hold on to your dream and the vision that you have for yourself, personally and professionally. So if you got something stirring inside of you, I want to encourage you to continue to strive for that, continue to move forward. Doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. If you're just young in your career, if you're got some years behind you, keep striving for that, keep moving forward. Next thing I would say as well is along your path, build others up, man. Your team, find out about them, build them up, help them fulfill their dreams, right? Professionally, in the work environment, and if you can, personally, invest in them as well and cause them to excel. And then lastly, I would say is be kind to yourself. A lot of times people are very hard on themselves where they want to be. And if you take a step back and kind of reframe. I bet you there's a lot of positives in there that you can use to build on and continue to grow. So I would say focus on those and continue to build on those positives that you've already done.
Well, thank you very much for those. And where can folks learn more about what you do or get in contact with you?
Successfullycoaching.com is the website, and you can learn more about the coaching and executive coaching there.
All right. Well, thank you so much time. Thank you so much for your time, Clint. I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Jana. It was a pleasure.
All right. And to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.